And welcome back to Healthspan Horizons. I'm your host, Melissa, here with Jasmine and Jeremy from sequencing.com. Jeremy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Melissa. Great to see you, to meet you. And Jasmine, great to see you again, as always.
I know it's one of those things where we see each other or we over email. I feel like we know each other, but then it's like, oh my gosh, in person, you look different than I thought that you would. I guess not even in person. We're just on the computer. So
yeah, through the virtual worlds, right?
I feel like I know everybody, so it's great. Anyways, Jeremy, where are you based out of right now? I think you're in Canada like I am, right?
Yes, a couple of Canadians on the call today. I am physically based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, so East Coast. I know you're on the West Coast, right? You're in BC somewhere.
I live in Calgary. Yeah.
Oh, so Calgary, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Not quite the bustling metropolis that Vancouver is.
Gotcha.
BC,
Gotcha.
But
yeah, but I should say that sequencing, I think, because we're going to be talking a lot about DNA and sequencing.com, they are a Silicon Valley-based company. Essentially set up in California. The founder, CEO, Dr. Brandon Colby, he's based in Pasadena, California. But I think, like you guys, we have a strength in a remote and diverse team that's spread globally. So me being the Canadian representative.
That's okay. I'm the Canadian representative for us too. So, well, since you kicked it off with that, I'd love to hear like a little bit more about the background of sequencing. Mainly, like, how did it start? How did you get involved in it? How long have you guys been doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Melissa. So sequencing.com, I believe, was founded in 2013 and really born out of a passion by the founder, CEO, Dr. Brandon Colby, who he himself is a medical geneticist and actually an individual suffering with a rare genetic disease, epidermolysis bullosa simplex. For listeners not familiar with that, it's a ultra sensitive skin disease where something as mundane as holding a tennis racket would cause severe blistering. And so for his whole life, Dr. Colby really didn't know the underlying root cause at the DNA level, and it really wasn't until the invention of, let's say, our one of our flagship products, Next Gen Disease Screening, did he actually get to the root cause of the genetic disease. And so, really, there's a deeper call when you're challenged with something like that, where effectively Dr. Brandon's Colby's whole life is on this diagnostic odyssey, right? And so now with the advent of next-gen sequencing, whole genome sequencing, the costs have just been driven down from, let's say, $3 billion a genome to, like $399 for your whole genome. So now it's been really this, commitment to providing people access to their genomes so that they can circumnavigate these diagnostic odysseys through more comprehensive genetic detection. That is through the whole genome. But then, more than that, it is how can you get a full sense of what your genome is saying, and that's why we use whole genome sequencing. And so, really, for the first time in the DNA industry, the direct-to-consumer DNA industry, we can now let the genome speak for itself. And so, really, that was the starting point. That was the motivation for starting sequencing.com, is giving people access, democratizing access to the whole genome sequencing. Now, as far as my involvement with sequencing.com, that came back, I want to say I think I met Dr. Colby in 2019, I want to say. And I was working from the other angle. I was working from human performance. So I was providing DNA insights to elite athletes, so Olympians, professional athletes, helping them understand what their predispositions were insofar as, say, injury risk and predisposition, training response, and nutritional, let's call it nutritional deficiency predispositions or food allergies, et cetera. So really starting to understand your base resource, your DNA compass, and starting to set up and design your training programs based on what is uniquely you and in the context of your goals and your sports. Anyway, so that's where I met Dr. Brandon Colby, and Athletigen was the name of the company that I had started. And what Brandon and I were able to do is form a partnership where we actually featured the sports genetics or performance genetics report in the sequencing marketplace, which you guys, I'm sure, are familiar. There's, more than 100 different reports there, different ways to analyze your whole genome. So really it was like my joining sequencing came from the synergy of the alignment around this idea of outsmarting your genes. So knowing what your predispositions are and taking action accordingly.
Amazing. Yeah, so speaking of the marketplace, how do you actually select the partners that are analyzing the sequences, and how do you ensure kind of the scientific integrity and reliability of the insights that are given on the whole genome sequencing data?
Yeah, we thanks for asking that. We have a rigorous onboarding process. From our side, we have world leading bioinformaticians and scientists that effectively are up to date with the most recent literature as it relates to the different single nucleotide polymorphism, the different variants, their confidence around the applicability of the insights. And so we run through a very, rigid quality analysis phase. But, the good news is a lot of our partners are, accredited medical genetic doctors. A lot of the people we work with have bioinformatics backgrounds. So it lends itself to really a peer-reviewed type of process. And you'll see as you go through all of the reports, the the transparency is there for the majority of them, indicating the relevance and the applicability of the data. And I would say the most comprehensive instance of this would be the next gen disease screen, right? And so that's not specific reports that might get into nutrition or longevity explicitly, but it's a basically 10,000 foot view, a snapshot of your whole genome and your predispositions for specific genetic diseases. And so in those reports, we connect directly to the literature. So that's really, I think, the most transparent that you can get is connecting the users to the science if they are so inclined to want to see that.
Okay, you talked a little bit about this with the marketplace and whatnot. Can you walk me through, for all of our viewers that don't know, like what do you do with sequence? Is it a blood test? Is it like, how would an average person do it? And then what do they see in that if I were going to take it for the first time?
Yeah, great question.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's so funny. We often forget how well, we think it's so trivial just to go from saliva sample to 3 billion base pairs of analysis, because we've done so much work to understand the supply chain and the logistics. But actually, they're the good news is for anybody interested, it's really easy. And the better news is it's very thorough and very robust on the back end. So I'll describe kind of like the 10,000 foot view, but it's simply this. You go to the sequencing.com website. So I believe we have a partnership offer for your users specifically. It's as simple as you click that button to get sequenced, and you will get a DNA kit sent right to your door. So within 2 or 3 days. And so it's a home kit sample collection device, which is just a buccal swab. So you just get basically cheek cells, a couple of minutes of swabbing, like with at least like an hour after eating, because what we're interested in is the DNA in your cheek swabs, and in the cheek swab, and so that'll go into the sample collection device. There's like a stabilizing buffer there, which means that cheek cell is preserved for like 6 months. Good news is it takes a couple of days to get back to the lab. And then in 6 to 8 weeks, we run your sample through, various extraction protocols. So, isolating the DNA from the cheek cell, putting that DNA into the next generation sequencer machines, and essentially, through various assays and quantification of the DNA, we're able to detect what DNA bases are there. We proofread it, so we sequence it 30x time, which is as good or better than clinical grade, and then we employ bioinformatic algorithms to assemble all of your data into a readable digital file, and then that is uploaded into the sequencing.com marketplace for you to potentially to take full ownership over and to explore, the potential of your genome fully in the context of the various apps that we have in the sequencing.com interface.
Yeah, and I'm actually a user of the platform and the product, so that's totally legit. So I kind of just automatically jump to the deeper things. Yeah, so it's good that Melissa, that you asked about how it actually works, and I actually like this test because some of the other types of tests there require you to prick yourself, like take blood sample, and I'm still a little bit skeptical about that. I mean, eventually I know I'll do it because I want the data, but I really like that this one you can do just the cheek swab, so that's pretty good. And so you mentioned algorithms a little bit, and now, of course, I mean, AI is a huge thing right now. So have you started implementing some AI, and how does that kind of play into the platform and sequencing? I think I saw maybe there's a beta going on at the moment.
Yeah, so that's a really exciting opportunity that we've been envisioning for some time, and we do have a very simple beta version of the app available now, which essentially allows you to the first thing we did was help people to better understand what analyses might be best for them. So imagine you get your DNA sequencing, and you're now confronted with this app store of or marketplace of different ways to analyze your DNA, and so while everybody has DNA, not everybody's been thinking about it or has their PhD in it, and so it's a new world, and we want to really bridge that gap and make people feel like they have a PhD in their own body, and so one of the first steps is like, well, given my goals, what reports might be best for me, right? So, that might be, hey, I want to, I want to, confirm or deny some, family history elements of, say, heart risk or, susceptibility to breast cancer, and so how should I analyze my DNA to get that information? Or I might be interested in, how do I maximize my health span using nutrition protocols based on my DNA? So like precision nutrition. So just starting to have a conversation with what's possible is the first step. But then and I should say that this is obviously we leverage the product suite under the Open AI API, but of course the answers are trained more on our internal knowledge around DNA insights, DNA report insights. So you're really getting to have a conversation with decades of world leading science, and so the goal, what we're moving toward, is to go from insight to action, right? So once I've chosen my set of reports, once my under my account, the AI knows me, my DNA, my goals. You can start to then build a plan that's based on your genetic data, for example. And so, one of the ways that a use case you might think about is, we were talking about Olympic athletes, right? So you might say, hey, I'm training to run or do the decathlon, right? And so given my genetic predispositions for injury, for training response, diet, nutrition, put together a 4-year training strategy for me, and then let's back into that from the macro cycle to the meso cycle. What do I want to achieve every year? And then breaking that down into months and then ultimately the week. So you could imagine, say, hey, create for me a diet and nutrition plan for a decathlete, given my genetics and given my current training focus. And so that's at the echelon of human performance. But you could also think of it, for example, well, I mean, let's face it. I view every single cell division as a performance, and so when I think about actually even just raising my daughter, there are certain life events that are essentially already in existence with the general healthcare practices in Canada, and so what I can do is I can look at those milestones and I can say, okay, given these milestones coming up. What are specific things that I want to bring to the attention of our GP, of our pediatrician, to consider in concert with the regular or standard checkups? And so that might include things like, food sensitivities, especially since, my daughter is moving from, breast milk to solid food. That might include drug allergies as well. So these are things that you can't know necessarily until you get a response, or if you have a deep understanding of your family history. But now that you have the DNA detection side of things, it just becomes a much more enriching conversation insofar as achieving that human performance, which I think for all of us, we can probably agree that's maximizing health span. So really in summary, what we want to do is we want to leverage AI to make sure that the data sources that we're considering are comprehensive and in context to the questions that we're asking. So it's the most personal data in context with the biggest goals that you can imagine. And so AI really helps us make that a reality versus the days gone by, which are more trial and error, or trial and learning if we're being optimistic. But this allows us to trial and learn maybe on less things and be much more predictive on some really important factors, potentially life altering factors.
That's awesome, and it's definitely very synergistic and kind of similar to what Rajiv is actually working on as well, as far as insights generation, being able to get these more detailed health and lifestyle plans and protocols to extend health span and optimize longevity across hallmarks of aging.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super cool. So, well, I kind of have one question leading into another one. So when you talk about kind of talking to your data and querying, does that go down to the level of actually asking about the raw data itself, or is it more just a comprehensive, can you ask about individual SNPs and whatnot? And then following up with that, how do you kind of ensure the data privacy and security, both in general on the platform with everybody kind of submitting their data, but then also when you're kind of adding on this additional level of insights generation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I'll get the housekeeping question out of the way first, maybe. So when it comes to privacy and security, and I'm sure this is the same with Rejuve. At sequencing.com, obviously we prioritize user privacy and data security above all else. In fact, that's what makes sequencing.com really different than the consumer genomics companies of the past, where a lot of those business models were based essentially on selling user data. And that's why prices were so low, frankly, is because, the data was being sold on the back end for thousands of dollars. At sequencing, we believe that we offer a product. We don't believe that you are the product. And so, and in accordance with that, it's our business to keep things as secure as possible. And so we implement the robust encryption protocols and secure storage solutions to safeguard the genetic and personal health data. And, our platform is compliant with global data protection regulations, including GDPR and HIPAA, really to ensure that user information is handled with the utmost care and confidentiality. And so again, there's also, we offer users complete control over their data, allowing them to, essentially download, take it with them, close down their accounts if they're not interested in the service anymore. But it really is in our best interest to commit to this level of transparency and security, because as I said, at the top of this call, like we're in business to provide service to our customers, our end users, to empower them to know their genetics, and that's what they pay us for. So that's really the commitment to data privacy and security. And so now when it comes to the second part of the question, which I think is, talking to your genome, there are like a few questions there. So, as it relates to, the AI. Well, let's start with the specific queries around specific SNPs first, since that's an important one. Well, they're all important questions, but the one specifically, if you come into sequencing.com and you have some kind of a priori knowledge or question about family history, and you want to query your genome, for example. So the where you would go is you would use Genome Explorer, and I like to think of that as much as it's cutting edge. It's really to really say Google something now seems like it's not cutting edge, but it is actually still quite cutting edge in terms of how you can query your genome. So like I can go into the sequencing.com platform, click on Genome Explorer, and then in the background, my data obviously is the thing being queried. And so I can ask questions or search by specific gene names. If I know gene names explicitly, I can search by conditions. So, if I, for example, was specifically interested in predispositions to different types of cancers or different types of heart disease, I can see all of the known genetic markers associated with those different disease states, and I can see where my genetic markers coincide with that. And I can do that, as I said, in collaboration with my GP in terms of building like a longer term health plan. So that's Genome Explorer to dive into the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms explicitly. And again, that takes some kind of preconceived idea about what you're looking for. In terms of the AI, the future that we're building there is to actually consider the nature of the comprehensive report marketplace, where we start to look at different aspects of health and wellness in these sometimes 100-page reports. So those include not only your predisposition to say heart disease or various cancers or food sensitivities or drug allergies. It's basically a very comprehensive encyclopedia on you. But now you can go and have a conversation with that specialized knowledge about you in the context of you. So that's where we're headed with the next release of our sequencing AI. And then one of the other ones is just as it relates to the next gen disease screen, which is looking at some like 20,000 potentially pathogenic markers, using the AI to actually create outputs that you can take to your doctor for future conversation. So it really is about getting to a sophisticated analysis of everything DNA about you, and really, I think we're at an exciting time because we get to build this product, in market with our customers. So I think how our customers, interact with the product based on the interviews that we'll be having, that's going to really dictate the future. So we're really excited for that synergy at sequencing.com between the customer and the company like never before in the direct to consumer DNA industry.
Okay, as somebody who has not taken the test yet, but I'm very interested now because I have celiac disease. And so now I'm like, what would my genomic data tell me about such things and things like that? So you're saying that basically if I took the test and we're finding out food sensitivities and such, what could I do with the data other than just reaffirming that, yeah, my body likes to attack itself when I eat gluten? Is there more in-depth data that would come for that, or recommendations, or you just take it back to your doctor and you have a discussion about what you found, or what happens?
Yeah, so I think well, I'll answer the question with a question. So when did you find out you had celiac disease?
Probably almost 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
And it just was happenstance. I wasn't even looking for it, to be honest.
So how did that come to be?
I was getting like blood work done because I had a family member that passed away young from a heart attack, and I was like, okay, I need to be responsible. I need to be in charge of my own health. And then they said, hey, by the way, did you know that you have this? And then I said, no, I did not know that actually. And then got an endoscopy, and then they were like, yeah, you do. And I said, that sucks. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sorry for your loss. And yeah, and but grateful that in this instance, family history, served as the impetus to be proactive with your health. Oftentimes people will struggle for years or decades, not knowing the source of their inflammation. So I get your point of view. It's like, well, when you already have something that has been diagnosed, yes, you're right. The DNA will, kind of, do the back end, reaffirm back end confirmation. Exactly. And, and by the way, there's even value to that. So getting, at the root cause mechanistically down to the DNA, that becomes relevant in terms of, family planning, if that's something of interest to you. So understanding, the actual root cause is different than the symptoms manifesting. So I think having both bits of information is extremely valuable. But you can imagine the scenario where you didn't have this information and you just felt that something was wrong. And or even back up further than that, it's like maybe your parents knew this because this was available at birth. And this is what I was going back to in terms of using genetic information to make better informed decisions throughout the life cycle, because presumably you've got a few decades of unnecessary intestinal inflammation because it was unknown that you had this gluten sensitivity. And by the way, gluten is in everything, right? And so you're basically carrying this low level inflammation, suboptimal gut health. And so, what does that mean? It means that, the nutrient sequestering is compromised. Growth and healthy development is exacerbated. And how does that manifest in other ways? Like, does that, negatively impact focus during school, participation in after school activities? And so, really this is all to say that it's getting the right information at the right time, right? So maybe the right time for you to know this was, when your parents were switching you onto solid foods, as an example. So yeah, we good that good. Let's get it confirmed, and then let's make better life decisions going forward based on this more complete knowledge. So, and the other thing that I'll say is just on the topic of health, like family health history, because that was something that I heard a lot. I heard a lot of people say in terms of, well, genetics just kind of reaffirms what I already know. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. And it becomes more true the older that you are. But, wouldn't you want to know some of those things earlier? And by the way, not everybody does, right? Not everybody does want to know that, say, they have a predisposition to Alzheimer's disease. but that's a philosophical question, and again, a question of preference. And obviously there is some issue around data privacy, and discrimination around that information. So these are really conversations that we're having that need to be had. But at the end of the day, I mean, my personal stance is I want the most accurate health information about me as possible, because health is the greatest currency that we have going in our lives. So sorry, that was a little bit soapboxy and rambly, but did that answer your question, Melissa? Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And what's interesting is that, so I have 3 kids and all of them have tested negative, but most of the time, or not all the time, the GP comes back and says, okay, well, celiac doesn't really show up in kids when you test it until they're over the age of like 8 to 12 or so. And so it's like, well, being able to do this and, have a DNA, genomic test would make more sense of being like, okay, well, maybe we should we could actually have data that says, no, don't eat this, because right now they all test negative. And I'm like, what are the chances that all 3 of you don't have this?
Right.
I'm not 100% sure.
Right. Okay.
But,
so they're testing negative for the symptoms. Is that right?
Yeah, they're in their blood work for sure. Yeah, all of them say no, and then they just come back and say, yeah, well, it's hard to get it. It's just not recognized very often in kids. And I'm like, okay, that's
right,
not very helpful, but okay.
Yeah. So you have, basically the serum markers that you can look at, obviously. So say total serum IgA as an example, and then you've got the histological markers. So again, that's like the intestinal health, intestinal biopsy, and then you've got DNA markers in there, right? So specifically like HLA, DQ2, and DQ8, I think. So the presence of those markers don't necessarily, confirm the disease, but their absence can effectively rule it out. So basically, we're saying is like celiac disease is very unlikely in individuals without those markers. So you're getting extra information there, and you're right. It's like why subject your kids to unnecessary inflammation? So hey, we're sequencing. We do this special. We have a special offer for Rejuve customers, so you might want to check that out. Yeah.
You know where you're going to find me next. Every time we interview people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do this because I love data and I track a lot of it on myself. But I think there's only, you can never have too much. I feel like, well, maybe you can. You might dive in a little too much, but I think for yourself, like you said, health is the greatest currency that we have, and you never really realize that until it's gone or something's not working the way that it's supposed to, and then you're like, oh my gosh. It's like when you twist your ankle or something and then you go, oh, remember when I could just like walk normally and now I can't? That sucks. It's like, that's exactly what, it's so valuable until we don't have it, and then we go, holy cow, I need to fix it.
Yeah. And it really is those like minor adjustments like early in life that help you build the habits that maximize your health span later. And so even just taking an interest in, might this, what might this, introduce some unnecessary load on my health? It's just that's a very responsible, position to take, especially if you're responsible for other people, like, as a mother, it's like probably one of the best things you can do is take care of your health to ensure that, you give your full focus and attention to your family, to help with their healthy growth. So, I think there is I can say, like, I personally can get a little too, deep into the data and lose the forest through the trees. But I think this kind of comes back to our discussion around AI is I think this could help us get better at asking questions, right? Because we know that the AI can really help with organization and structure, a lot of that administrative work. that would take so much time previously. But then obviously there's also the complex analyses, so that might have been daunting as well. So you've got, really great support, coming in the future. And so it really, I think, gets us back to these more like existential questions, like, well, what do I want to do with all this potential? So yeah, I think understanding, your goals, and then, the deep potential stored in the human genome. It's a very exciting time for self-actualization.
Definitely. Um, yes, I guess that's kind of leading into the idea of personalized medicine and preventative, really, and the hopeful shift of the model away from reactionary to that. So, how do you kind of envision the integration of genetics and sequencing into that space, and how do you kind of project that it can be maximized to its greatest potential in order to achieve that
Yeah,
better?
yeah. So I think, really, really, with everything that's happened in, the last 3 to 4 years have been really exciting, to say the least. But it's been building, as far as I can tell, in the last, 3 or 4 decades. I've been blessed, fortunate to be, thinking about DNA for about a quarter of a century. So, I did my undergrad and PhD focused in this area. I taught at universities. I was a professor for a while before going into industry, and seeing the power of industry, really as something different but complementary to academia. First of all, I just want to say, like, that journey has been amazing. And so, while I can't predict the future, I certainly understand where we came from, and I under like I used to, visually analyze DNA outputs, in their kind of, spectral curve analyses to actually, edit base calls on, frankly, just, substandard ways of sequencing much, much, much less information. So just knowing that we have all this information, and then now that we have these algorithms to better and more quickly and more comprehensively, analyze data, I do envision this future where, genetic sequencing and AI driven insights are an integral component, or integral components of healthcare. I mean, I think that's stating the obvious. But I think that the integration will enable healthcare providers themselves to deliver highly personalized care, because they're going to have better tools, right? I mean, let's be honest. Any medical practitioner might spend, one class understanding genetic information, and in the past that's not enough. And it's like, well, now all of a sudden that one class can be highly targeted about using the tools, understanding the principles of DNA sequencing, and then understanding the tools that are becoming available. And so now all of a sudden, that education can be much more meaningful and impactful. And it's really, that is in essence like the proper education and the enhancement of the tools, as I see, getting better health outcomes and reducing, health costs. So again, that comes back to getting people on preventative health plans earlier, getting them to avoid, medications they might be allergic to by, running their pharmacogenetics reports, getting them on anti-inflammatory nutritional diets, which we just talked about. Well, let's face it, like, long-term chronic disease is really the manifestation of these comorbidities, which are all, kind of at their core, these inflammatory diseases. So I think, I think about that, and then I think about, the challenges ahead is I suppose ensuring widespread access to genetic testing. So does everybody get this? So I'm kind of thinking about the cons or the limitations right here, because there is the hopeful future, but there's some, certain realities we got to get ahead of or in front of. So is this something that's going to be made available? Like, is it part of standard care? Like, you get the HLA test when you're born, your bilirubin test, and that's all part of standard care for infant screening. what are the ethical considerations we need to address? Data security at large, like who owns this information? Because, like, again, I do imagine a future, probably 10 years from now, where everybody's getting their whole genome sequenced, right? So, despite the limitations, I think the opportunities are immense. I think personalized medicine. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. Given what your app has been designed to do, but personalized medicine has a potential to revolutionize healthcare by making it proactive, precise, and patient centered, and not only that, also participatory, right? So you get to be a part of the conversation, ideally at the center, guided by your DNA. And I think that, like I said, I've been around the industry for a while. Sequencing.com is, it's doing something special here, and it's poised to lead this transformation by continuing to innovate and expand our capabilities. And that really just comes back to keeping the individual at the center and in complete control of their genetic information.
Yeah, I would definitely like to actually see that becoming part of more standard care, like having whole genome sequencing and other type of tests to be able to see and kind of give people risk profiles ahead of time, so that they kind of already know, yeah, for instance, what their kids are susceptible to, so you can know at a younger age all these sorts of things and be able to kind of and it could, I mean, if you extrapolate it, it can save people's lives, really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see why. I mean, of course, yeah, the cost was a factor historically, but it's continuing to come down. So I definitely hope that that will become the standard, or at least, we're building kind of a new world in society here, where at least there will be an option to have it affordably, such as platforms like Rejuve. So I guess a little bit of futurism, like, so when we talk about longevity, do you think that the key to sort of maximizing human lifespans beyond the known limits is based in genetics alone? Like, do you think that we're going to reprogram our DNA to live 1,000 years or more, or something like that? Or do you think that that's not really possible? Like, what do you think about it?
Okay, so we're getting into like futuristic conversation, like X-Men style. Is that what we're okay.
Yeah, I would like to throw in a little bit of that,
Okay, yeah, because I mean,
you'd be surprised the answers we get. Some people are like, yeah, I'm going to live forever, I'm going to implant my brain into a robot. Some people are like, no, man, I don't want to live that long, because I just want to be healthy. So we like to hear everybody's thoughts on what they envision the future to be.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to like differentiate between, like, these are my personal thoughts and not necessarily sequencing.com's view. Because I've watched a lot of sci-fi movies, right? And I grew up and was educated in a time where mRNA vaccines were an idea, gene splicing, and genetically modified organisms were in their early days. And I mean, I've in the lab, I've done a lot of cloning myself, in terms of not cloning of myself personally. I mean, running.
I was like, okay,
yeah. No, running like molecular biology, using the tools of molecular biology to create clones in a petri dish. This is just at the level of bacteria, and so you really can do some pretty amazing things with the molecular tools at hand. So now again, this obviously there's a ton of responsibility that coincides with this, and so this again is just me speaking in the realm of possibility. I think I should quote that there's I think it's a recent Harvard study that says really we're capped out at around 120 based on our our current chromosomal structure. I don't know, I think it's based on various telomere studies. Again, I haven't read the study, but I do remember reading that finding, is that we're really kind of tapped out at 120, and you don't really see too many people living beyond that. Now, is there some kind of genetic switch that can be activated? Is there some kind of change in behavioral lifestyle to affect that? I mean, I think the answer is, probably yes. And I think, yeah, you can get creative in terms of, what that might look like when you start to think about, gene splicing or different cryotherapies. Like there are ways to, I think, extend your life. I think we just got to really ask ourselves, like, what quality of life is it that we're going to be after when we start to implement those things? And, then at a certain point, it's like, are we still human? If we start to splice in genes from other organisms. So I think there's like some super, far out fun things to talk about, but, they don't come without their consequences. Imagine everybody on the planet today could live till they were 1,000. I mean, that completely changes the paradigm of, well, our socioeconomic, how do we even define society now? What is the self? What is the family? What's the economic impact there? So uh, I think it's really hard to, pretend that any advancement doesn't have, massive repercussions in terms of, social structures that are required for, I think, the long-term success of the species. So I think in terms of, going into the specifics, it, it's hard to pick a winner in terms of the best way forward. Like there's a lot of longevity treatments that I'm reading up on that seem to be more aesthetic than actually focused on health span. And this is going to be the unsexy answer, which is like the best solution for longevity and health span as it relates to our current, call it, genetic capability, encoded genetic capability of 120 years is, exercise and diet, right? Like that's the those are the two things that come back as, certainly the way to maximize your health span outcomes. And so then the question is for folks, alive right now, how do I put myself in an environment where those things become priority? So how do I live my life? So, the first thing that I do is I'm taking care of my daily exercise, and I'm supporting a nutrition, for long-term health. I think in terms of, yeah, gosh, the gene splicing sci-fi, it's like anything's possible. Like, for example, um, there's a sea slug that grows this appendage, and in its diet, it actually eats algae and it harvests the chloroplast, and it actually cultivates these chloroplasts into this appendage, and so it doesn't need to eat anything. It lives off of light because the photosynthesis is happening in those chloroplasts. So I give you that example because you're like, oh wow, that's so far out. It's kind of like it's not, it is far out, but it's like it's actually not as far out as what we already do, and that's thought to be from an endosymbiotic event. So that is, our ancestral cell, eukaryotic cell, engulfing a bacteria and farming it for energy. Well, we call that bacteria today a mitochondria, right?
Yep.
So if we look to evolution for an account of biological history, when we start to talk about actually gene splicing and having these hybridized organisms, you can see it's like, well, it's we've actually done it before, although I don't know, I'm not sure if we were consciously doing it, or is there some other higher conscious being that had done that before, or is it kind of blindly rolling the dice and evolution producing these outcomes? So it doesn't really matter the forcing mechanism that got us here. It's just to say that it is possible to do these really far out things, and I think a lot of answers are going to come from studying like natural history and evolutionary biology. Because if you start to think about, just throwing in one-off genes, there's a system wide impact on that, right? So I think that there's definitely a ton of exciting opportunity ahead. It's just how do we match that excitement with the right, how do we maybe change the excitement to cautious optimism, and make sure that we have the right people at the table who are considering the long-term impact of these changes. So I don't know. I kind of danced around the number. Like I didn't actually say we could live till we could be 1,000. I think I'm personally focused on maximizing to the 120. And if there's some really cool invention that allows me to upload my consciousness so that I could live forever, I'd like to have the choice. I'm not sure that I'm not betting on that as my final destination, but it's nice to potentially have the choice. Mm.
There's somebody in the longevity field that feels that death will be optional by 2045.
Yeah.
Very specific year. And I go, okay,
Mm.
interesting take on that. I agree with you. I think that we all kind of come back to this with every person that we've had on this podcast of like, I would rather focus on extending my health span. I want to feel like I'm 30 when I'm 50, 60, 70, 80, and not necessarily living into the like 200s. It's that I just want to live a longer, better life.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's like our moderation goal of just being like, no, I want my family to still be here. I want them to be healthy. I want me to be healthy. I want to be doing the things that I love for longer and not be crippled by my body shutting down on me, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's my personal goal. Not necessarily to be a chip implanted in a robot quite yet. I'm not quite there.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I like that. I like how like we get these metrics in healthcare. Like remember BMI was a thing. It would be cool if we had a metric that specifically spoke to your chronological / biological age ratio. Like that would be really interesting. And then that's the thing that you're trying to optimize. Now, I mean, I've heard some scary stats in the US where I think it's like 88% of people have a comorbidity. So you're not even ready to, have that conversation, or perhaps you are, but it's like, okay, here's the first way to give you 10 years back on that biological range. It's like, you're pre-diabetic. Here are the changes that we're going to make now. Again, diet and exercise that will allow you to turn back the clock, right? And then it's like, okay, well that pre-diabetes was also tied to obesity, let's say. So okay, now here's our fix for that. And you say, oh, you've got some kidney stress. Here's an additional fix for that. And I suspect a lot of this is going to be diet, nutrition, and education, which maybe that doesn't sound exciting, but that could be very exciting, where you start to get everybody aligned on like, hey, I want to be here for as long as possible and to do the most possible good. And the way that I know that I'm tracking to that is my biological to chronological age ratio is at least 1. Hopefully it's like 1.25, right? Maybe it's 1.5. Like that would be a really interesting currency to be walking around with. As the roll up index. So I think you want to talk about near term future. We start to get a lot of people centered on that number that's completely within their control and it's completely individual. That could be really exciting.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a number that I think that we always come back to. Is I feel like at the end of every podcast, it's the education aspect of educating the masses and being like, it could be really easy to solve these problems with your diet and exercise. Like it's almost free. I mean, you have to buy groceries anyways. You can go outside and exercise. Like some of this stuff, I personally, as somebody who's watched a lot of people like using Ozempic, like now, as this is like the big life altering drug of the 21st century right now. It's like I'm very curious to see the implications on society moving forward if obesity and prediabetes and stuff disappears because people are trying to treat it long term and stuff. So not that I'm like a proponent necessarily for drug usage to solve problems, but for a lot of people, especially in the States, I think that that's going to be helpful and hopefully swinging the pendulum back to caring about what's going in your body, what's happening with it, and things like that. But I also am very interested to see what the implications of it are moving forward. But I think that that particular drug, the semaglutide, is opening a lot of people's eyes to how their body could work, and the preventative measures that they can do in addition to that. But I think that's a conversation for another day. But I'm interested in what's happening with it, because this seems to be like this drug that's taking the world by storm at the moment. And we don't really know the implications of it, but it seems to be impacting a lot of people's lives at the moment.
Yeah. I think that an exciting potential for your app is, again, can we get to that behavioral change? Because really what we're talking about is building the habits, right? And this whole notion that you are what you repeatedly do, and that forms your character. So therefore good character is a habit. Now, I understand if people are suffering, and Ozempic is their solution, but that shouldn't be the goal out of the gates, right? Like when you're starting off as like a healthy young person, to say, oh, don't worry, you can eat anything, be reckless. There's this Ozempic cure.
Yeah, just pop a pill and it'll be good.
Yeah. That's not it. I think I think the true power of what you guys are doing, what we're doing at sequencing.com also, is it helps people to bring more intentionality to what they do day in and day out. And so by definition, that requires that they have a goal. So another great metric is, how many people have a health goal in their life? And wouldn't it be cool to have a health goal that was not reactionary? Right? Like so oftentimes health goals are reactionary, where, you get a relative that dies, or, you have a major health scare. And so, how do we make those, much, much more, proactive? And I do think that that's where AI is going to become much more conversational. And again, it's about these small checks. It's not about these major, prescription drug corrections or surgeries, et cetera. So I'm really excited to see how your app release coming, late in the summer, early fall, is going to help with that revolution.
Yeah.
I think so too. We're actually in the process. We're starting this campaign for the summer of basically like involving our community and such in setting those health goals, those preventative ones of like, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? My personally for the summer is like, hey, I'm going to go run a 10K at the end of the summer, just so that I can do it. Did a half marathon a while ago. That I don't need to do that again, but a 10K is like a manageable one. So we're trying to like encourage our community and whoever else's community to essentially be like, let's start this now. Let's create these healthy habits and stuff moving forward, so that we aren't reactionary in our solutions of things like that. So I'm excited to see what happens with that, but I also agree that like being able to see your data, recognize it, and then do something with it before something happens is the goal, I think, for all of us in the space, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a given that we want those healthy habits, and I do think that these technologies are going to be facilitating that. But then there are also the potentially life-altering, life-saving one-offs. Like, for example, my brother had elevated levels of a particular cancer marker. I think it's mGAL, I think it is, and then in addition to that, he had higher ferritin, and anyway, I using the sequencing.com platform, it actually just turned out that there was a new release like that week, like talk about serendipity, that spoke about essentially the genetic predisposition for higher iron levels. And it turns out that, that I had it. And so I brought that information back to my brother and I said, hey, like, just so you know, like there's a genetic predisposition for this. So bring that to your doc. And then that becomes part of the conversation. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, well, good to know that. One of the things we're going to add to your treatment plan is that you donate blood once or twice a year, as an example, to control your excess levels in that way. And then also, like, understanding our own genetic predisposition for, type 2 or type 3 diabetes, is like when you have those conversations based on your data, it kind of, it changes like when you just hear kind of in a general public health education statement, it's like, yeah, okay, sure, I know that's a concern, but that'll never happen to me. But then you're like, no, okay, actually, it's more likely that this thing will happen to you. So prioritize that. It's more likely that this, um, type 3 diabetes, which is basically Alzheimer's, for example, will happen to you more so than say chronic heart disease. And so you can kind of like prioritize de-risking the various disease states and get ahead of it that way. And so you're kind of like playing whack-a-mole, but you actually have like a a measurable KPI, and what it is that you're testing. So I think it feels like much less of a black box to the individual's path towards optimal and precision health. My solution to 120 is going to be different than Jasmine's. So
for sure.
Yeah, I think it's getting at that. They have an idea of quantified self, and and you guys were touching on kind of creating almost a culture around health and wellness. So being able to combine those and incentivize the behaviors so they feel more natural, and that these things are not like, oh, I have to be some insane biohacker or like completely change who I am to achieve these things, and that it just becomes a natural ebb and flow with your already kind of natural life and aspirations.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely achievable.
And to have it like distilled down to like, here are the 3 things I'm going to do today, and it's part of a bigger plan, so that when you add that up over the year, it's like, here are the 1,000 things I did this year. Like that adds up. 3 things a day for 300 days, 365 days of the year. That's more than 1,000 things that you can do. But you try to do all those things at once, and it's just daunting. So yeah, really, really excited for the next version of your app.
Yeah, we're super excited for it to finally go live, and yet to continue to layer on the various levels of insights, including incorporating the genomic insights as well once we kind of go forward.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're going to be updating that offer to your community. We'll be, highlighting the I think the key valuable features and benefits. So mainly the next gen disease screen. So it's like, have access to everything, know where all of your weaknesses are, and make an action plan in collaboration with your health team. There's the Genome Explorer that we talked about. So if there's some kind of burning question that you have, you'll be able to get answers like never before. It's like you kind of build your own panel every time you search a specific condition to understand what variants do I have that make me vulnerable. And then Healthscan is like every week access to publications in the public domain. So all of the genetic studies and discoveries, you automatically get those updates every week, which is amazing. It's like the future is here. We're lockstep with genetic discoveries, whereas it might take 10 years in the past to get that information out to the public. And then what we talked about was with using AI, sequencing AI to help navigate the report marketplace, and then eventually having that sequencing AI as your DNA coach, if you will. So yeah, we're really excited to extend a warm welcome to the Rejuve community, and really looking forward to deepening that partnership this year. It's been a long time coming. I mean, we've been talking for I want to say a couple of years. So this is a lot of fun. It's really amazing to see Rejuve grow, to see sequencing grow in parallel, and the future is bright.
Yes, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, I feel like you just like ended our segment so peacefully. You're just like, all right, we're together. We love it. Tight with a bow. That's the perfect ending here. I don't even need to say anything.
Oh wow! Well, there we go. It came a natural and authentic end in of itself. Well, hey, it was my absolute pleasure in being here. So I know that Jasmine, you and I have a podcast that we've done on my end as well. So I've started my own personal podcast separate from sequencing.com. It's called The DNA of Things, but I've also started a sequencing.com podcast called Sequencing Stories. I may actually put you on both of those platforms if that's okay with you. But for listeners, feel free to check us out there. We'll have the latest and greatest on sequencing stories, and the DNA of Things. That podcast is a little bit more far out than more sequencing.com kind of success stories, but they're both fun.
I enjoyed that one. Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah.
Excited for the episode to go live. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. I'm so looking forward to what we're doing in the future. I feel like we finish these calls and I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm going to go test all my stuff. We're going to be best friends. We're going to do all these things together. So I love keeping the momentum moving forward after
awesome.
this. So it was great to have you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa and Jasmine. Thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.